Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Adam Mueller, with the State Your Business podcast. And today I have Dennis
Mejia.
I didn't want to get that wrong. Dennis Mejia. And recently, you and I were with Manoj and some other guys that we both know, some acquaintances and some friends. And the purpose of that trip was to go look at some apartments, some 300 plus units, and learn a little bit about the landscape of the apartment world and property management specifically. And while we were out on a walk one day, you got to share some of your story, and I thought, man, this is the perfect guy to have on the show. There's such a, when it comes to immigration, and I'll let you touch on all of that here in a minute, but when it comes to coming from another country and immigrating into the U.S., there's such a far left and a far right view of it. I feel like a lot of the middle ground encouragement and like, here's the tools to be successful can get missed or muddied up. And so you got to experience both sides of that from what you shared with me. And so I guess without further ado, if you wouldn't mind sharing your story.
Yeah, well, thank you, Adam, for having me. It's actually still thinking what I'm doing here, but anyways, my story is just, I think it's just like everybody else's story, Although, I went through a whole different, set of goals that I put myself, as a kid. I have very high standards of what I wanted to become when I was a father and a husband. And I think that's how I end up in here. I think it's always the family, that motivates you to do what you do. And even before I have a family, my dream was to be prepared for when I was a family leader and stuff. So, yeah. I grew up in Honduras. I come from a very humble family. We are 6 brothers, and my mom and my dad, they were really good fathers. We have struggles like every other family. We were a very poor family, if you can call it like that. We were very blessed, always very blessed, but we lack a lot of stuff that other people didn't, and I think that's what it was different for us. We almost dream about what it would be, to have this, or being able to go here or do that, or just being able to afford something. That's part of my childhood. But I went to school like everybody else. I would say, when I was in school, I was like an A student, and when I went to middle school and my technical high school, I was like maybe a B student, which it kind of changed and impacted a lot, because it was very easy for me to be a C student when somebody's paying the bills for the school, and it's not you who has to do it. I guess you don't get to appreciate that point, and that's what happens to me. My dad used to pay for my school, and I guess I didn't thought it was that important. As a teenagers, we have a whole set of ideas, and you never know what you want in life, I guess. So I didn't take advantage of that. But then when I was 19, my dad passed away. He got a heart attack, and it was kind of dramatic. We didn't know what we were gonna do. My older 2 brothers and I, we were worried that we had a family. We had, a mother and 3 other younger brothers that we needed to support, and we didn't know how we were gonna do that. But my 2 older brothers, it seemed like they did have a plan, and they did what they could. They support the family, and later on, I was able to do that. I went to technical high school, and I got a electronics bachelor degree, and I was never able to work in a career, to be honest, because after I graduated, I immigrated to the U.S. It was very hard to try to compete in Honduras. is a country that is a beautiful country, but it has a lot of limitations, for professionals and stuff like that. And
What kind of work did you do while you were there to pay
Oh.
for going through that schooling?
I did a lot of carpentry work. I did a lot of mechanical work. I did everything. I actually work in a market, in a street market, and I was selling clothes, women clothes, and I will go to this. My aunt had a little store, and I would work for her. And at some point, we couldn't sell anything, so I would just grab some of that clothes and put them in bags and start walking on the streets and start offering the clothes. And sometimes I got into buses and I started doing my business in there, selling clothes in buses. And that was just one of the many things I did. I also work in construction. I started working when I was 13 to support, my school and my family with what I could. But yeah, I did many different things. I did deliveries. I did, sell clothes. I work in this shop doing machinery, learning how to weld and all those fun stuff.
And this was all before you immigrated to the U.S.?
Yes, this
Okay.
was just me trying to survive in Honduras and trying to be able to pay for my school.
And so then, what brought you over to the U.S.? Where did you go? What did that look like? And
Ooh.
why, I guess? What made you, obviously there was a dream, but you mind sharing on that?
I'm very proud of the country I was born, but I always set my eyes in this great nation, and I knew I had something to offer to this country, and I wanted to be part of it, and it was my dream to become a U.S. citizen, and I just try. I tried to get a visa, and I didn't meet the requirements at the time. But I also, the last Christmas that I spent with my father, he asked me for a favor, and I have a sister that lives in the U.S. and he asked me to come and look for her, and try to help her out. He has some stuff that he couldn't accomplish, and I think he thought maybe I was the person that I could do what he couldn't. So he asked me as a favor, man to man. I was only 19 years old when he asked me for that, and after he died, he died 6 months after he asked me for it. Nobody expected it, and I guess that's one of the reasons why I came to the U.S. to seek for my sister and seek for a better life and try to still support the rest of my family that stayed in Honduras. But the main reason I came to the U.S. is that I always wanted to be part of this nation. I knew that I have something to offer, and I was gonna do it, because when I have goals, I have to accomplish them. Otherwise, I'm not happy. I'm not me. I have to have a reason, to do what I do. So that's how I end up in the U.S.
And then when you got to the U.S., where did you end up going, and what did that look like? Well, how was the language barrier?
That was very difficult. I think I was a little lucky that I went to New York, and I would say 60% of people in New York speak Spanish. But
What
even
part
though
of New York?
I went to the best city in New York, Bronx. No, I'm just kidding. That's what I went to Bronx. I went and lived with my sister and her family at a time, and then I just tried.
How did you find them? Because what year would this have been?
This was in 2006. I was in communication with my. This was 2005. Actually.
2005. Okay.
2005. So I was in communication with my sister after my dad died. I guess she found out and she went to Honduras, and somehow we connect. And then I knew where to go.
So you went from. So what part of Honduras did you live in?
San Pedro Sula.
I'm not gonna try and botch that.
That's okay. It's complicated.
So you go from there to the Bronx.
I go from there to the Bronx. I took the long way.
The long way?
The long way to get to the Bronx. Yeah, it was quite a journey to get there. You know,
What was that like?
it was.
I mean, are we talking hitching rides, hopping on different bus?
No, you know, I actually I was an illegal immigrant in 3 different countries, right? I crossed Guatemala illegally. I crossed Mexico the same way. It's weird. I have this great story about Mexico and stuff. You know, all the things that I live in there. I was homeless in Mexico.
Really?
I asked for money, you know, to move from one state to another state, trying to find people that will help me, you know, with money so I can eat and I can continue doing that. I met two guys from Mexico, and one thing that surprised me is that they were very shy, you know, to actually go and ask. And I actually was the one, you know, asking people for money, and I was able to collect enough money, you know, to feed myself and the other 2 guys, and actually to pay for the bus fare to take us to the border or different states, whatever, you know, we needed to go. It was quite a journey, you know. I got beat up many times, you know, by some cartel people in Mexico. That's just a whole different story, right? Sometimes it's not worth to remember. But, you know, I actually was able to make it to the U.S. and I remember it was sometime between February and the snow was horrible. It was horrible, and I was in this place, you know, locked in this little room where they had me, you know, because I was trying to get to New York, and I didn't know how, so I, you know, start talking to people. And this guy said, well, we can bring you over there. That's what we do, you know, and then it's going to cost you this much. And at that time, you know, I was broke, right? So I didn't know. So I offered the guy, hey, you know what? If you have things in your house, you know, that needs to be repaired, I can help you with that. And that's how pretty much, you know, he got me into it. And I believe in the guy, went to this place, and you know, he locked us in this room, and there was more people in there, and he said, well, it's going to cost you this much to get over there, you know, and then he gave us the opportunity to talk to a family member to ask for money, and I called my sister, and she helped me out with that, and they brought me to New York, but it was a journey, though. It took like 6 days to get there, you know, in this little minivan, and the minivan was designed for 6 people max. We were 16 in the minivan. Yeah, like it was horrible. It was a horrible journey, but yeah, that's how I ended up in New York. Then over there, you know, I think I had a day to actually realize what I did, you know, and what I was. And next day I was out looking for a job. And you know, I did different things. I did furniture deliveries, you know, and I also work at this store where they sell all furniture for babies and stuff. And I was the person, you know, loading everything on trucks, and it was quite a hard job, you know. And I got paid $50 USD a day. And
$50 USD.
Yes.
A day.
A day.
And how much of that did you get to keep?
Like 18.
Really?
Yeah, because, you know, bus fare, food, and need to travel from one city to another one. It was, by the time, you know, I was done with the day, I was making $16, $18 a day.
$16 to $18 a day.
Yeah.
What was it like delivering furniture in the Bronx? Because I've been to Chicago and done some ATM deliveries, but man, that wasn't New York City.
You know, it was a little stressful at sometimes. You know, sometimes Bronx is a pretty old city, right? So a lot of those buildings don't have elevators and stuff. So we needed to carry the furniture through the stairs, and sometimes they're so narrow, there is no room in there, and sometimes you scratch them going up, and when people see them and they say, "Hey, I don't want it," and gotta take it back. It was from every delivery we did, I think maybe 50% that we carry through the stairs were a successful delivery. The rest, it was take it back, because I don't like the scratches. I don't like how you brought it in, and it was. There's all type of people. There is people that is very good and grateful, and there is people that they really don't care what you need to go through, to do their service.
So I'm curious, man, coming from Honduras, making your way through Mexico and the southern and eastern states up into New York, what was the attitude climate change like? I mean, because I got going on 5 kids, so it's interesting raising kids, and I know you have kids, and we'll get to that too. But when you get around other families from different walks of life, you can really see the ones that came up in money and ones that came up on tough times, we'll just call it. Obviously, my definition of tough times is probably pales in comparison to what you've experienced. But I would imagine you saw some different attitudes up as you got up to New York from where you came from. How'd you deal with that, and what was that like?
I'll tell you what I experienced in these 3 different countries that I went through for my journey. In Guatemala, I actually I met all type of people. I met this person that helped us out, when we were traveling in the bus, and the police got into the bus, and they said, well, whoever doesn't belong to Guatemala, please step out of the bus. And, they took us out and
Step out of the what?
The bus. They step out of the bus. I was traveling in
the bus.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they took everything from us, money, everything. And they left us in there. And then there was this lady at this bus, that she saw that, and she got off and she said, hey, I'm sorry for what happened, and I'm assuming you guys have no money. And she offered us to stay at her house, and she was a very humble person, very humble house. She helped us like you have no idea. In Mexico, I have another family that helped me out too. They let me stay at their home for a month while I figure out what was going to be my next step. In the U.S., I have met all type of people, people with a lot of money that are the nicest, that are actually trying to help out when they see a situation like the ones I went through. And I have met people with no money that they're horrible. They're horrible. I guess for some people, when you come to the U.S., everything changed. For some people, change for good, become a better person. And other people, they just become horrible human beings.
When they came to the U.S.?
When they came to the U.S.
So it's safe to say that more money just makes you more of what you already are?
It depends, because I believe if you grew up in a family, that they actually teach you, the value of money, and you learn to realize that money is just a tool, you become more humble. But there is people that never had money, and when they get it, they just think that gives them power or entitlement to treat others, the way they want to. But I guess, you find that type of people in every country, every situation.
So now you're delivering furniture in the Bronx, and you're helping your sister?
I'm trying, at least just to be like a support, maybe not economic support, because, at that time I couldn't even afford to pay for my own stuff, But I was trying to actually, learn how to everything work in the U.S. Because what you see in movies is not the same, as when you actually come to the U.S. You realize that American dream, is not just to go to sleep and dream about it. You actually have to make it come true, and that's the hard part. It takes a lot of dedication, and gosh, there were days that I wanted to give up and just go back, and but I still have this goal, and I knew I was gonna make it. I kept asking God, and eventually He responded to me.
So
But
there's a faith background I'm picking up here.
yeah,
Did that come from Honduras, or was that along the way?
I think that has come from my family. My family always believe in God, and we know that there is, this power that comes from Him. If you are loyal, and do what He asks you to do. But that's my belief. So I always have God, for everything. I always ask God. In every decision I make, God got to be there. I can guarantee you that in the bad decisions that I have made, in a lot of those, I didn't ask for God's favor, or guidance, and I guess I have learned my lesson. I know a lot of people has different ideologies and what they believe, but I do believe there is a God, and it's my motive to keep going. That's how I know I'm gonna get things done. When I relate all that to Him.
So now you're working to support yourself, but you're with your sister, and you came from a country that doesn't speak English. How was that part for you? I mean, did you just learn it along the way? Did you get into some education for it? How did you learn a new language?
I just learned it on the way,
On the street, huh?
on the streets, doing deliveries, applying for jobs. Here in Minnesota, it was the hardest, when I moved to Minnesota, because coming from New York to Minnesota is like a whole different change. Yeah, it was quite a challenge. So what I did, to actually being able to communicate with other people, I started going to church and Spanish, and that's actually what I met my wife.
Really?
Yeah.
So backing up, you had talked about you went to New York, you were in the Bronx delivering furniture, and then at some point you went back. Where did that, was that in Minnesota? Was that in New York?
No, I mean, from when I left New York, I never went back, but maybe just once, I don't think that New York is the place for me. But, I actually, when I came to Minnesota, it was like June, July, when everything is growing and nice, and, and I realized this is actually, what I dream. And I tried to make it here. I did, wanted to go back because, at some time I wanted to give up. It was very hard for me, try to make it in Minnesota with the language barrier, and it was hard trying to find a job, like everything in Minnesota, it was new to me. So I ended up doing sheetrock, hanging drywall, and all that type of stuff for a company. And it was tough. It was very tough, There were some times that I didn't even have lunch because I didn't know how to ask for lunch, at a restaurant. So there were days that I carried this dictionary, We didn't have all this technology we have nowadays, but it was tough. But I knew I was gonna make it. I had no other option. I needed to make it.
So when you're applying for jobs and getting hired, was that $50 a day? Was that because you didn't have your papers, or you weren't a legal U.S. citizen at the time? Is that what it was?
No, that's what they offered me. They knew I didn't have papers, and I think sometimes a lot of employers see that as an opportunity, and they just take it. I'm not talking bad about anybody, but it's business, I guess. Here in Minnesota, I was making $7 an hour per hour doing drywall. This was in 2006, and I did that for like a year.
Okay, so you left New York, and then you came to Minnesota.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then after that, I went and started doing hardwood floors. It was a very tough job to do, and I did that for 4 years too. And at that job, I had a lot of issues because of my beliefs, and then it was very tough. I seemed like my boss at the time didn't like, my what I believe in and stuff, and it was very tough. So I wasn't able to continue doing hardwood floors, because we didn't believe the same things, and it was very hard to work for somebody like that. So yeah, I ended up in Minnesota with a family, with no job, and I went through a lot of depression and stuff. It was tough.
Okay, so now you have a family. Are you talking about your family from Honduras?
No,
Or
I'm
you-
talking about my family here in Minnesota.
Okay, so your wife and children.
Yes, yes.
So then somehow you said you met her where?
A church.
You met her at a church.
Yeah, I met her at church. When I started going to church the first year I moved into Minnesota.
Okay.
Yeah, we met there at church, and we hit it off from there. One thing I can tell you though, from all the good decisions I have made is picking my wife. That was one of the best ones. And like I said, the best decisions that I have made, I have asked for God's favor. It's like He put me in the right spot. He put me right in front of her, and I knew that I needed to marry that woman, and I said my goal, and I said, my goal is to marry her, and to start a family with her, and that's what I did, and I think it's one of the best decisions I have made in my life.
And where's she from?
She's from El Salvador, but we met here in Minnesota. She
So
grew
she-
up in California.
Okay, so she's from El Salvador.
And then her family moved to California when she was very, very young.
Okay.
Yeah, so El Salvador, it's like, it's different for her. It's new to her. She doesn't know El Salvador, like.
She didn't
knows the
grow up
US.
there like you grew up in Honduras.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And so then she came to California. Then did she have family or something in Minnesota? And that's how you guys connected? That brought her there?
Yeah. She has some family here in Minnesota. She lived in here 20 years before me. So, but yeah, like I said, we met at church, and we actually struggled a lot with her. We went through very difficult times. When we married, right after that we hit recession in the U.S. So I had no job and no way to provide for my family. That's when I went through all this depression, that I couldn't provide, and that's who I am. I'm a provider. If I don't provide, I feel bad. I don't function if I'm not able to provide. And I guess that's how I was raised. But yeah, we went through very tough times. There were times that we went to those places where they give you free food, and there were a couple of times that we actually lined up for that to get some free food because we didn't have anything, to eat or to give to our recently born baby, And another part of that story, is that when I moved to Minnesota, I got a phone call saying that I had a kid in Honduras, and that's my older son.
Wow.
Yeah, it was. We went through a very tough situation,
How old was he when you found out?
Well, he wasn't born yet, when I was told that I was going to be a father. It was shocking for me because, if I knew, that there was somebody in Honduras that I was expecting a child, I don't think I would move to the U.S. I needed to take responsibility. I don't think that I wouldn't be able to come over here. But then some stuff happened, very rough things that he went through. And my mom helped me to raise him until he was 10 years old, when I was able to bring him to the U.S. legally.
So you brought him to the U.S. So at some point in here, you got your citizenship.
Yes.
What was that experience like? How'd that work?
That's, it's a bittersweet experience. You see a light, on the tunnel, that everything is gonna be okay, but nobody tells you, it takes up to 10 years to see the light. So I went through, 10 years in the U.S. working, just doing all type of jobs, trying to make it on my own, because I couldn't apply for the companies that I wanted to work, like, try to work on the career that I had, like working in electronics. That was never, something that I could have done, because I couldn't, there were so many requirements, and I didn't meet those requirements at the time. But, eventually I got blessed, and God said, enough is enough, and here you go. And I got my green card. It was a long process. I paid my dues to this country. I went through a lot. One of the things that I did, and I think that helped me a lot, is that I started paying taxes since day one, since my second job. I started doing that. My first job was, actually I think the U.S. will have to pay me, because I wasn't making any money. It was bad.
So you started paying taxes before you had a Social Security number?
Yes.
How does that work?
You
get some sort of a number or something assigned when you apply for citizenship? Is that how that works?
No, this doesn't give you any status, but somebody told me about it. They said, hey, you know what, if you're gonna be in the U.S. and if you eventually think that you're gonna try to become a citizen, the best advice I can give you is start paying your taxes. So I start researching, and I find out that there is this number called ITIN number.
ITIA?
ITIN number.
Oh, ITIN, okay.
Yeah, and that's what I did. I applied for it, and then I start paying taxes, and my tax bracket was a little more than, a U.S. citizen, and we don't get any benefit from that. It's just you pay your taxes. That's what you do, right?
You can be here as long as you pay your taxes.
Well, that doesn't give you any status, but while you work in the U.S., you have to pay taxes, and I know there's a lot of people that doesn't do that, and when they try to become a legal resident, that kind of affects them a lot. But like I said, I wanted to be part of this country. I wanted to do things right, when I was here.
That helped the process along or something, and then.
That's the number one requirement for actually getting your papers.
Okay.
Have you paid taxes? While you have worked in the U.S. So yeah, that was a really good advice that I got. And I did it, and it helped me a lot. Yeah. And
then you got to the point where you were able to bring your son over here.
Yes. Yeah, I after waiting for so many years, and I got the letter that I waited for so long from the U.S., saying that my waiver was approved, and then that I needed to go to the embassy in Honduras, to the U.S. embassy in Honduras. So I was afraid. I was afraid because in Honduras is where they tell you if you can come back to the U.S. or not. So I left everything that I built, and I just trust God that He was gonna make it work, and He did. And after I got that, my life's changed like immediately. It was a whole different set of opportunities that I got. Once you get a Social Security number, it's like the windows of opportunity, just open. The doors just open. You just gotta seek for those opportunities. And I know there is a lot of people that have the same opportunities, but they don't seek to find them. They focus on other things, I guess. But that's what happened to me, after I got my green card, everything started changing, and that's when I saw the opportunities and business came along, and yeah, that's how I took off, I guess.
So now you went through the 2008 to 2011-ish recession
Yes.
with the housing market, and because that directly affected you because you were doing drywall and remodeling projects.
And yeah, we were doing hardwood floors, and
Hardwood.
all that died down. There were days that we only worked like a day, per week. It was very tough. Actually, my wife on a house at a time, and we lost it because we couldn't make the payments. So the house got foreclosed, and we went again to zero. We lost everything and start from zero.
And this was 2000.
That was during recession.
Okay.
No job, no house, nothing. So I was doing like little jobs, like doing maintenance here, maintenance there, whatever I could, replacing doorknobs, for somebody that didn't know how, replacing, faucets and stuff like that. Whatever I could, some days I made $25 and some days I made like 150. But, it was not always like that. It was very tough. I have these jobs, doing maintenance in these apartments, and I went through some difficult situations in there, like things didn't work out. And I think that's when I hit rock bottom. I was doing maintenance work in these buildings in St. Paul, and some things happened that didn't allow me to continue working in there. And I was again going to my knees asking God, for what was my next move, what I needed to do. And I got so depressed to a point that I got very sick. I felt like I was not gonna make it. I felt like my American dream ended. And I remember every night around 3 a.m., praying, going on my knees and praying for one opportunity. And I ended up in the hospital because I was very depressed and stuff, and I had some suicidal thoughts and stuff, and I'm glad that that nothing happened. Now I don't think that way, but that's when my mentor came along. It seemed like he needed somebody to do some work, and I went and talked to a bishop at church, and he said, I have a friend, that he does real estate, and maybe you can help him do repairs and stuff. And yeah, I did that. He called me, and I arranged a meeting, and he hired me. I was his maintenance person, for these houses in North Minneapolis, which was another journey, It was a very amazing journey, to be honest,
Section 8 in North Minneapolis?
Section 8, North Minneapolis,
Knocking on doors, telling them they gotta go. Pay the rent or you gotta go, buddy.
Yeah. I know a lot of those tenants still don't like me because, I needed to do my job, I guess. But yeah, it was an amazing job.
You gotta have a story or two.
I do have many stories. I have funny stories, I have sad stories, and I have some stories that just, you don't know what to do, if you should laugh or what. I was a maintenance person, for this company, who now is my partner, which, I truly believe that it was God's answer, to put my mentor right there where I needed. In North Minneapolis, I went through a lot of stuff. As a maintenance person, you get mistreated and stuff, it's brutal. It's brutal over there. Eventually, I became the manager for this company, and that's when I started to do the knocking on the doors, asking for rents and stuff. It was tough. I got some some tenants that they tried to stab me while I was trying to collect rent. You know, I have other tenants, you know, that we end up taking to court many times. Many times it was tough because I didn't know, you know, nothing about court. I didn't know how to talk to a judge or nothing, but I still did it. You know, I went and we never missed a case in court. I don't know how that happened. I guess.
Oh, you always won?
We always won. We won every case. You know, there was ones that got repealed and stuff, but we still won all those cases, which was amazing. But you know, it's not all because of me. You know, my partner, he was there to support me and guide me. You know, he's way more experienced on these situations. But it was a very cool journey. You know, I have this story about these tenants that I don't know if they forget what they have told you the previous month, but I have a tenant that every month I went and knocked the door and asked for rent. She said, well, can pay you the rent right now because my grandma just passed away, you know, and next month she will say the exact same thing. So I realized, you know, a lot of these tenants, grandmas pass away every, 3 times a year maybe? You know, it's funny. There was always a whole different excuse, you know, on why they couldn't pay the rent. But, you know, it's amazing. It was an amazing experience that I lived doing that.
What's it like being almost stabbed by a tenant while you're managing a property?
Oof, that's scary. You know, that's something that, yeah, I guess it put some motivation on me on maybe consider, you know, knocking the doors and stepping back. That's a crazy story. Yeah.
They open the door, out comes a knife, you step out of the way.
That's the first thing that comes out of that door, you know, a knife. I actually fell, you know, because when I saw that coming towards me, I just took 2 steps and I was in the staircase, so I fell down the staircase and I run. I ran to the back of the house and, you know, got in my truck, and my wife was with me at the time, and I said, you know, this person just tried to stop me. You know, that was North Minneapolis, the beautiful North Minneapolis. Amazing. There is so many stories that I have about this place. But yeah, I mean, that's when I guess I learned to work in a real estate. You know, I tried my own stuff too. You know, doing some house flipping, car flipping. I did many things just to try to make money. But
with car flipping, is that buying them from an auction, repairing them?
Yes, buying from an auction. You know, I repair them myself and put them back for sale. But yeah, I tried many things, you know, to make it in the U.S. But let me tell you something though. No matter what I try to make it, I didn't seem to find the right thing that worked for me. But it was actually that I was not financially educated. You know, it was not that I wasn't doing the right job. It's just that I was very bad at managing my finances. And once again, you know, my partner, you know, he invited me to this.
So yeah, we're missing that link. How did you go from managing Manoj's properties, because we both know him, and that's how Dennis and I met, to becoming a business partner? Where did that connection happen?
You know, when I started working for Manoj, he, the best boss I have, right? He actually set a plan since day one. You know, this is what is going to happen to you if you know, you take care of this company. He said something that it really got me. Now that's something that we offer to our employees. You know, he said to me always, if you take care of the company will take care of you. And you know, I truly believe him, and he kept his word. He actually, that company took care of me when everything got sold. But you know, I had such an amazing relationship with him that when everything got sold, I had so many job offers. Like, I couldn't believe it. You know, I had people offering me a lot of money that for me before it was just a dream, you know, but I still want to continue working with Manoj, you know, and he has this. He's a business broker, right? So he has these gas stations that you know, for some reason they were not selling. And I said, hey, you know what? I really want to continue working with you. Let's find a way. And he said, well, there is this gas station that we can try to see if we can make it work. And we did. We actually were able to purchase that gas station. It was an amazing journey to get there. And that's
so
how.
you have an investor-operator relationship.
Yeah. He's my partner. You know, we are 50-50 on this.
How many
but
gas stations?
There's 2 gas stations. We own 2 gas stations. You know,
Where are those located?
they're located in Cannon Falls.
Cannon Falls.
Cannon Falls
So if you're passing through Cannon Falls, is that
Right.
off I-35?
52.
52.
Yeah, 52.
Off of Highway 52.
Yes,
Stop
yes.
in Cannon Falls.
Best tacos in Cannon Falls.
Best tacos
And
in
pizza,
Cannon Falls.
best gas station pizza.
And best gas station pizza. And
No.
what are the 2 brands?
Marathon and BP
Marathon and BP.
in
There we
Cannon
go.
Falls. Yeah. Yeah, no, I became partners with him and
That must be where you got the financial literacy, the teaching on how to handle finances.
actually I started doing that before. I don't think I will be able to get into this business if I didn't, you know, try to get better at finances. You know, I actually started going to these Dave Ramsey classes, you know, financial peace that Manoj invited me to. And I've been doing that for more than 10 years now. And every time I go, you know, it's like I learn something new. So that's how I think I end up. This is what I believe. I believe God gives you what you can handle. If you can handle your finances, I don't think God will give you the opportunity to manage, you know, something, an asset like that. And I think that's what it changed, you know, that I actually start learning about all these things. And so far, I think we're doing pretty good.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
And so what do you guys got going now?
Well, we got those gas stations going. You know, I have a rental property that I have in Brooklyn Center. I have another source of income. I still do the car flipping. You know, now I do it on my time, on my terms. So everything I do with this extra is just for preparing for opportunities, you know, in the future.
Man, that is amazing. So you went from living in Honduras to making your way all the way up through a total of 3 countries. You land in the Bronx, then you come to Minnesota, you get your citizenship, you find out you have a son in Honduras, then you bring him over here, and then you go from this recession time and you lose the townhome to managing properties, 40-something properties? 41 properties, Section 8, North Minneapolis. And then you become a business partner for these 2 gas stations that you operate and own. And then now you have your house, you have a rental property.
Yes.
You flip houses and flip cars.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And you learned a new language.
Yeah, along the way.
Along the way.
Yeah. It's like I said, it's an amazing journey. You know, sometimes it's even hard for me to believe that it's me who's living this life. You know, it's been tough. It's not easy, but I mean, if I can do it, right? I think anybody else can do it.
I was just gonna say, what would you know, usually I say, what would you tell a 20-year younger version of yourself looking to start a business? But in your case, I mean, what would you tell somebody that wants to come over to this country? What to expect?
Wow. First, I gotta say, you know, if you want to come to this country, just do it the right way. Don't copy me. You know, that's a very dangerous journey. It's horrible. But everybody can make their own decision, right? I cannot encourage anybody to do that. What I did. Life is way different, you know, when you are a legal resident in this country. If they're trying to start a business, gosh, I think the first thing I would say, don't be afraid. because I think that's one of the things that stop me from doing many things. Like for me, I would say I have my partner's encouragement. So that's why I kind of feel comfortable to do a lot of these things that I'm doing now. But it's scary to just jump in, into something, especially in my case. Like I didn't know anything about property management, but I went through the whole thing and I learned it, and I was very good at it. And these gas stations is a whole new thing for me, and I'm still in the process of learning it, but I think we're doing pretty good. So yeah, I don't know, I guess.
And get educated on finances.
I think that's the main thing, like there is no way you can start. Well, you can always start a business, but I don't know how long you're gonna be able to run it without having the right knowledge, like something that I need to work on is taxes, how to work on taxes and stuff. I think that's my next goal, and see, how that works, the magic of all that, because it can be a good and a bad thing at the same time. You know how to do it, then you can make, save some money, or, help yourself to reinvest that. But if you don't know, you might be just letting all your money go in the drain. So, yeah.
How many kids do you have now?
I have 2 kids of my own, and I have 2 stepdaughters.
Okay.
From my wife, previous marriage.
What are the age ranges?
My boys, there are 18 and 15, soon to be 16. And my stepdaughters, there are 32 and 30, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
And as far as your boys go, what's life like for them? Based on what they've learned about what you went through, what you've shared with them.
There is this thing that I like to do. On my quiet times, I like to write part of my story, how I end up in here. Because
oh, you're a writer.
Sometimes,
okay.
Not all the time. Maybe not as I should or I wish I was. But I do have, put in paper a big portion of my life, just as a treasure for my kids, just in case, they ever go through something similar to what I went through. At least, they can read and see what I did, if that helps, But for them, I think life is a little easier than what it was for me, which was my whole goal. But they are actually very impressed with my life. My youngest, he loves to hear about my story. One point, I told him, hey, I'm working on this book, about my life and stuff, and if someday I cannot finish it, I want you guys to continue it. So that's an agreement that the 3 of us have. They will continue telling my story, when I cannot do it anymore, from their point of view. So, yeah.
So you mentioned that your dad passed when you were 19.
19.
What about your mom?
My mom is still alive, thank God. She, gosh, what a role model that I have, my mom, It's just, her determination is amazing. I think she was one of the first motivations for me to actually trying to change our life. Yeah.
And then you have 5 siblings?
Yes.
How are they doing?
Well, I have 6 in total, right?
Oh, 6.
Yeah. Pretty good. I my 2 oldest brother, they're sad, they go with their life. They do pretty good. And my 3 youngest, I have the 2 youngest ones that are just gonna graduate from college, pretty soon here, electronic engineer and then a lawyer. Yeah, pretty amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Is everybody stateside now?
They are all in Honduras. I don't know what you mean by that.
Oh, in the U.S.
No. They're all in Honduras. I'm the only one, from the family that lives in the U.S.
Okay.
I do have, some of them come and visit and stuff, but yeah, I'm the only one that actually established here. Kinda like a solo journey. Yeah, pretty amazing though.
And you had mentioned when we were talking in Memphis that Honduras has a growing economy now compared to when you were a kid.
Yeah, it seems like infrastructure over there is growing a lot. I don't know who's investing all this money, but it seems like something is happening. But you know how that works. It's usually the people that actually can afford to build all that stuff that actually make the money, not the people that don't have access to these type of opportunities.
Does that add to the job infrastructure there?
I believe so.
Factories or what's really?
Well, it's kind of hard because right now we are under this government that I really don't understand very much what is happening over there. But I don't know. I think the economy could be better if we had a better government. But nothing I can do to control that. Make a change. But only the people that lives in Honduras has the power to actually change it, right? To do your research before you go and vote for a leader is what I would say to everybody, because sometimes, people just make the vote based on their color, if it's red or blue. And I think that's the worst mistake that people can do, just giving a vote just because I like this color or because this is what I supported my whole life without actually, investigating if that's what is best for the country. And sometimes we make those decisions based on what is best for us and not the rest of, the country. But yeah, that's a whole different story, whole different topic.
What's Honduras known for? Is that more agricultural?
At some point we were known for exporting bananas. We were, pretty good at that. But once again, our leaders sometimes don't make the best decisions, and so we export coffee. That's pretty big in Honduras, but yeah.
You still go visit?
I do. I go every Christmas, to
That's
gather
a
with the family.
convenient time of year to leave Minnesota and go to
It is.
Honduras, Central America.
It is. I mean, the weather is beautiful over there compared to the ice and snow in Minnesota.
Because what do they have? Rain and dry season?
That's pretty much it.
Okay.
Summer is 90 degrees weather, and winter is just 70 degrees and rainy. Those are our two seasons over there.
Well, cool, man. Really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your story.
Oh yeah, man. Love it.
I think it's super inspirational, especially for, I think for, young entrepreneurs, people that are wanting to have a different perspective or something to glean a little hope off of, but especially for somebody that's immigrating or has immigrated to the U.S. Like I said in the beginning, there's just such an extreme, call it left side or, progressive side to it, and such an extreme conservative side to it. And it's really, if you kind of try to find a middle ground where you still have the ability, the encouragement, I should say, to come in and then come alongside of people and help them and do it the right way. I think that, there's a lot of opportunity for people to leave a bad situation or, a country that may not care about them and come be a productive member of society in the United States.
Right.
Very inspirational.
Well, thank you. Another reason why a lot of people leave our countries is because of the crime. It's not just because you can't make it financially over there, but it's also the crime. It's bad, and something has to change eventually. But until that happens, I don't see this stopping anytime soon. The immigration. But
they ran your pockets in Guatemala, it sounds like, on the bus.
yeah, the police.
Yeah.
The people that were
The people that are
supposed to
supposed
protect me.
to protect it. Yeah.
It is sad. It is, but I guess it's now that I see it, it's just another thing to add to my book of experiences. It is what it is, right? I'm glad that I was able to make it, and I see there's a lot of people, the dream to be where I have come, and I don't know what to say, man, but you know, I just said, just keep going. Just keep going. There's no reason to stop. Why? What would you stop? To take a break and then just set yourself behind? Just keep going. That's what I did, and I think that's what it works, right? You're never gonna know what you could have done, you know, if you stop. And I cannot live with that. You know, I have to just accomplish whatever I set as a goal, because I will not be able to sleep at night, you know, just trying to figure out what it would have been, you know, if I didn't. So yeah, and I think that applies for everybody, you know, not just people from Honduras or from other countries, but people here in the U.S. You know, I see, you know, we are the land of the opportunities, and even though that there is the rumors of recession and stuff like that, that's the best time actually, you know, to find those opportunities. But you have to prepare for it. You know, you have to be prepared for these days that are coming, you know, towards us. And that's something that I'm very grateful, and for the rest of my life I'm gonna be grateful with my mentor, you know, that he taught me that. You know, you don't prepare for the good days, you prepare for the bad days, and that's when the opportunity comes. The bad days. Those are the ones that you need to be watching for. And here we are, you know, trying to see what opportunities will come our way, and see what we can jump in, you know, and when. So, yeah.
I think it's super cool that you took the time to document your life story
Yeah.
for your kids.
Yep.
I think it'd be really neat if you got it published.
You know, I never seen it that way, to publish nothing. It was mainly because, you know, I'm a LDS member, you know. And when I got baptized, a good friend of mine who was the missionary who baptized me, he always write in his diary. You know, and for us in Honduras, that's not a thing, right? Well, at least not for me and my family. And one time I asked him, why do you do that? Why do you write down about what happened to your day? And he said, well, somebody have to tell your story. And what better person to tell your story than yourself? So he's the one that encouraged me to actually, you know, start writing. And that's what I did. You know, when I can sleep, I just start typing until I fall asleep. That's what I do, you know. I don't go in specifics, you know, this is what I did today, but I actually picked, you know, the most amazing thing that happens during that weekend, you know, and the worst thing that happens too. So I have to put both in there, just for my kids to, you know, to have a guidance, or if they ever want to tell the amazing stories, you know, of my journey coming from Honduras to the U.S. to their grandkids, right? So. Yeah, we'll see what that does for them.
Much respect to you for doing that. That is just awesome.
I don't know, thank you. Appreciate that.
Way to pave a path for them.
Right. That way, you know, they know that it's not always easy, right? You know, life is not easy. It's not. But you can make it easy if you take the time and the effort, you know, to prepare for those tough times. So, yeah.
Preparation, man.
Preparation.
Keep your powder dry and be ready.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Thanks for joining the show.